Okay, the name of the series is Seasons of the Soul, where we're following the months, the holidays. Now we've just entered into Sefirat Omer, and we have a 7-week period. In a certain sense, it's the longest cycle of the year. Though it could be compared, if you want to count from Rosh Chodesh Elul through Simchas Torah, so you have 52 days. If you want to count from Rosh Hashanah through Simchas Torah, you have 22 days. This, of course, is in Eretz Yisrael. And Sefirat Omer is 49 days. So it's among the most important and longest cycles of the year. So in the next 7 weeks, we will be learning about Sefirat Omer. We will touch on Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, Yom HaZikaron, the day before Independence Day, the Day of Remembrance. Then we have Pesach Sheni, we have Lag BaOmer. So there's a lot happening, Yom Yerushalayim, and then Shavuos. So there's so many different aspects of this period. We're going to start tonight with Sefirat Omer. And I want to try to give over a couple of ideas. And we're going to start with some ideas from Rav Ginsburg from Sod Hashem Lireyav. If anyone has the book, one of the chapters is on Sefirat Omer. And he makes parallels between Sefirat Omer and the different levels of the soul, with world, souls, and divinity, and with the 4-letter name of Hashem. So we'll see how much we get through tonight. So we're going to start is after we count Sefirat Omer every night, there's a passage that we read. In that passage, that's where we bring up the fixing that we want to do on this day according to the combination of the Sefirot. So today in Eretz Yisrael, those who are watching from outside of Israel, it's still, we're at sunset right now, was Gevura Sheba Gevura. So I just want to read like the beginning of this passage and then the end, and explain how Rav Ginsburg makes a beautiful, really a meditation, a very simple intent, kavana, to have when we say this every night. So it begins, Ribbono shel olam, atat tzivitanu al yedei Moshe avadecha lispor Sefirat Omer. So we begin, Ribbono shel olam, Master of the world, you have commanded us through Moshe, your servant, to count Sefirat Omer. And then it continues and it brings verses from the Torah showing us where this mitzvah is written in the Torah. And then at the end of that, we say that we want to fix, l'taken, ma shepagamti b'sfirat, let's say, Gevura, Sheba, Gevura. Every day, of course, is a different combination. And this is how it ends. This is what I want to get to. So it ends after we mention the Sefirot, it says, Al Yedei Zeh Yushpa Shefarav. And through this, meaning the counting and also the intent of trying to fix that which we may have blemished in the Sefirot that we're combining, through this, a great bounty, a great influx of spiritual energy, this influence, this bounty should spread to all of the worlds. And we should be able to rectify, to fix the level of soul of nefesh, of ruach and of neshama, from any type of blemish. L'taharenu, and to purify us, ulakadshenu, and to make ourselves holy, b'kedushatcha ha'elyona, in your elevated holiness, talking to God. Amen Selah. So what does Rav Ginsburg explain about this? So in our request here, he shows that we are actually making 5 different requests. And in 2 different models, he compares it to the 5 levels of the soul and the 4 letters of God's name and the Kotso Shel Yud, the tip of the Yud. And in the second one, as we'll see in a second, he compares it to another model of 3. So here we'll start. Actually, we'll start with the model of 3. We know anyone who has the Hebrew letters book from Rav Ginsburg, which I had the awesome privilege to work on with him. This is going back to the late 1980s. And of course, it's a classic book. It's been reprinted many, many times. And really, the book is based on a revelation from the Baal Shem Tov to his brother-in-law, that in every letter of the Torah, and further, in every circumstance, in every situation, every type of reality, there are worlds, souls, and divinity. There are olamot, worlds, neshamot, souls, and elokut, divinity. So he compares this to what our request here is. So we'll start with the worlds. So we say, Al yedei zeh yushpa shefa rav bechol ha'olamot, that we are requesting that an influx of pure spiritual godly energy enters into all of the worlds. And this means not just the physical world, material world that we live in, but all of the spiritual worlds which are ever present in our reality as well. So that's the worlds. And then we say, L'taken nafshotenu, ruchotenu, nishmatenu, in order that we can rectify these 3 different levels of soul: the nefesh, the animal soul; the ruach, the emotional component of a human being; and our neshamas, which is the intellectual level of consciousness. So that's the neshamot. So we have the worlds, olamot, and neshamot, souls. And then the last 3 are all connected to a more divine consciousness, and that is letaharenu, to make us pure, ulakadshenu, and to make us holy, b'kedushatcha ha'elyona, in your elevated, high, not to be compared holiness. So this is just a very beautiful kavana to have, that as we're counting Sefirat to Omer, we are drawing Shefa into the worlds. We are trying to fix our souls, our midot, our personality, our characteristics, and we're trying to elevate ourselves to a higher level of purity, holiness, and to be a part of God's holiness. As the Baal Shem taught us, that the divine soul within a person is an actual part of God above. Chelak Eloka Mima'al Mamash, an actual part of God. So this is a very beautiful, simple, but profound way to think of what are we trying to accomplish during Sefirat Omer, rather other than just counting the days to Shavuos. There's like a lot of work to do. A lot of work in the worlds, in the level of souls, and raising our consciousness to a level of divinity. So that's comparing these words to three levels. Now we'll go through the same words and just connect it to 5 levels, because there are 5 levels of the soul: the nefesh, the animal soul; the ruach, the emotional; the neshama, the intellectual; the chaya, which is the bridge from ordinary consciousness to a higher level of superconscious, and connected very much to will and divine pleasure. And then on the high, and that's called the chaya, the living soul. And then on the level of yechida, the unique point of God within us. Sometimes you call it the pintel yid. So we'll just go through this quickly. Yushba Sefirat b'chol olamot. This is the nefesh, the lowest level, most connected to the body, the physical, the material world. Ulatakein et nafshotenu v'ruchatenu v'nishmatenu. So tikkun hamidot is happening on the 7 lower Sefirat. This is the place of the midot, of the emotional: chesed, gevura, Sefirat, netzach, hod, yesod, and malchut. And in the inner dimensions, as taught by Rav Ginsburg, chesed is love, ahava; gevura is yira, fear and awe; Sefirat is rachamim, compassion; netzach is bitachon, is self-assurity, confidence; hod is tmimut, wholeness, also the idea of praise and acknowledgement. Yesod, the inner dimension of Yesod, is emet, the true foundations on which we base our lives. And Malchut is shiflut, existential lowliness or humbleness, which is kingdom. So on the level of nefesh, we're drawing a great abundance into the physical world, which the nefesh is most connected to. And then we say, ulatakein et nafshotenu, ruchatenu, v'nishmatenu. So that's what we've been talking about, fixing the midot, the emotional personality characteristics of a human being. And then we have ulataharenu, and that is purity. Now, I'm going to go back, is that we started from the lower hay of God's name, and we're like working up a ladder, just like we work up a ladder of the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. So here we're working up the ladder of the letters of God's name. So the nefesh, this is the lower hay of God's name. The vav, these are the 6 sfirot, and then they're connected to malchut, which is the lower hay. And there's 6 of them, so that fits in perfectly with the vav. The higher hay of God's name, this is l'taharenu, to purify ourselves, and this is connected to bina. And this is the mother image, the feminine image. And of course, the whole concept of what's called family purity, taharat mishpacha, is so based on a woman's natural biological cycle and of women purifying themselves in the mikvah. So that's the ta'arenu. And then our request is ulakachenu, and to make us holy. That is the upper yud of Hashem's name. And then all of that is to be included in God's Kedusha above, and that's what's called the Kotso Shel Yud, the little tip of the Yud. So here we've gone through two very, very elementary kavanot and meditations that we could have as we're counting Sefirat Omer, and of course during the day, because according to tradition, Shavuos is the 50th day. Actually, it says in the Torah, Tisparu Chamishim Yom. You should count 50 days. But everyone knows that we're only counting 49 days. So why does it say you should count 50 days? Well, 50 days is the holiday of Shavuot. But this is connected very, very much to the idea of the 50 gates of understanding, Chamishim Sha'arei Bina. Now, this is a concept that we have all of the time, and it's a bit of vague as to what exactly are these 50 gates of understanding. We also have a concept called the 32 pathways of wisdom. That is in the actual opening of Sefer Yetzirah. And there you actually have names in Kabbalah are given to these 32 different levels. There are 32 different types of what are called intelligences, seichel. But with the 50 gates of understanding, it's much vaguer. But that's where Sefirat Omer comes in, because the closest we could really come to understand what we're being told by these 50 gates of understanding is that it's a process of elevation where every day of the Omer, we take one level of impurity, because if you remember the very, very famous teaching that we had fallen to the 49th level of Tuma in Egypt. So we're starting like at the bottom, and we're trying to get to the top. So every day of the Omer, we are trying to exchange, fix, rectify, purify, heal one level of impurity and to take on some kind of a fixing that will get us to a level of purity. That is what we're doing every single day. And that's where there are many, many different texts out there. I wrote a book on Sefirat Omer. There are many out there where it goes day by day, and we go over which Sefirot we are combining and what we can understand from this, how we can use each day to try to improve ourselves a little bit. Like many, many times during Sefirat Omer, something will happen during the day. It could be positive, it could be negative. And all of a sudden we go, oh my gosh, this is the exact Sefirot that we counted today. Like today was Gevura Sheba Gevura. And obviously this doesn't happen all the time and not to everyone, but there are those moments where something will happen during the day and like, wow, this is a perfect time for me to fix something about Gevura Sheba Gevura. Or something will happen very positive, and it's like, wow, this is exactly the Sefirot. This is the way I just acted is a mirror image of what I can fix. Okay, so that was all in this idea, and I'm going to read it again. What we say every day after counting. Al yedei zeh yushva shefa rav b'chol olamot ulataken nafshotenu v'ruchatenu v'nishmatenu v'mikol sig upagam l'taharenu l'kadshenu b'kedushatcha elyona. Amen. Salah. So hopefully I've given over a couple of ideas to think about that are really all encompassing. They encompass the worlds, souls, and divinity, all 5 levels of the soul, and an understanding of how they're connected to the 5 letters of God's name. Okay, Rav Ginsburg points out one other thing. He points out many things, but the one that I've chosen, put it that way, is also something very, very interesting, because we know that a root word in Hebrew can have many, many different meanings. And one of the deepest types of Jewish meditation is when you take a root word and you make the connections between the different meanings of the word. And it opens up the Torah and the inner dimensions of the Torah tremendously. Is to take a word or a name or a name of a person or a place, and just even take a dictionary and like, what does this root mean? And then meditate on all the different meanings. And then when you read the verse again, where this word is, it's like, whoa, it has a second meaning and a third meaning. So he points out very amazingly that the Omer technically is a measurement of 3 scythe, because after the first day of Pesach, it's in the Mishnah, a very beautiful explanation and description, a visualization, where they would go down to a barley field close to the Temple Mount, and they would take a scythe, and they would take 3 swings of the scythe, and they would gather it up with the stalks and everything, and that's an Omer. And they would take it to the temple, and they would winnow it and do all the different processes to get rid of the chaff, and then they would grind it, and they would make it into fine flour. They would do it through 13 sieves, 13, to get it finer and finer and finer. My whole point is that the Omer is of barley, and the word for barley is seorah. Is seorah. Now, this same root, though, has other meanings. One of them is hair. The hair on our heads is sa'ara. And to estimate something is shi'ura. And it's all the same root, So Rav Ginsburg, it's just very brilliant, shows that all 3 of these words are very, very connected to this time period. So the first one is, and again, he connects it to the 4 letters of God's name, starting from below. So the lower hay of God's name, this is the Sorah, this is the barley. And we're told in our tradition that barley in those days, I know we all like mushroom barley soup, but in those days, barley was considered mostly an animal food. And wheat was considered more of a human food. And so therefore, the symbolism is that we begin the process with our animal soul and everything we need to fix about the animal soul. And then when we get to Shavuos, the offering in the temple, the special offering of Shavuos, were 2 loaves of actually chametz that were brought to the altar. So we make the transition from animal food to human food. And this symbolizes the process that we just went through of going from the 49th level of impurity to the highest level of purity. And I mentioned before the 50th day, the reason it's brought down why we don't count it, we only count 49 days, even though the Torah says count 50 days, is because the 50th represents the 50th gate of understanding, which we're told is somewhat beyond our capability. It's the Ein Sof. It's a level beyond our comprehension. So now we have Seorah, which is the lower hay of Hashem's name, and then we have excuse me. Wait 1 second. I think I want to correct that. No, I'm correcting that. I'm sorry. The lowest level is hair, is Sa'ara. Why? Because that represents the whole idea that we don't cut our hair during the Omer. And that's the lowest level. That's the level of the hay of Hashem's name. And that is all of the minhagim of mourning. No weddings, no live music. We don't cut our hair. So this is like the lowest level. And then there is Seorah, the barley. And that's the Vav of Hashem's name. And why? Is because, again, we're trying to go from animal to human, from barley to wheat. And that represents the emotional part of the psyche. And these are the 6 Sefirot of Zer Anpin and Malchut. So that's the Vav. That's the 6 Midot, the Vav of Hashem's name, and Malchut. And then we're going up the ladder here. Now we're at the higher hay of Hashem's name. And this is the root. Shi'orah means to estimate, to be able to make an estimation. So it says in the Zohar, when it's explaining levels of consciousness, so it says, Kol chada v'chada lefum shi'orah dilei. Every person according to their level. In other words, like the 50th gate of understanding, we can't go where we can't reach. And so each person has to fix what they're capable of fixing. In other words, God doesn't expect more than we're capable of. God and ourselves, we should expect ourselves to do our best, always. But as Rabbi Nachman teaches, that it's self-defeating to set goals that you simply can't meet. That leads to frustration and loss of self-worth and self-esteem. Every person according to where they can get to. Now, as we climb up the ladder, figuratively, symbolically, from the bottom of the beginning of counting the Omer to the top, so we are stretching our capabilities. We are making all kinds of tikkunim. So this is just an example of literally an infinite amount of examples where you take one root word and how we see on every level of counting the Omer, whether it's our hair or the barley or the estimation that we are going for. Like in Elul. Elul is a whole month of a chance to do tshuva, to improve, to make new resolutions and everything. But everyone according to their level. The same thing with counting the Omer, is little steps at a time. We're not asked to go from 1 to 49 in one big, huge step. This is probably I'm not saying this sarcastically, is kind of like the original 12 step program. This is a model of self-improvement. You go into any bookstore and you'll see shelves of self-improvement plans, models. If you go to the diet section, you'll probably get 15 shelves. But certainly in the self-improvement section, but this model is over 3,000 years old. This is an incredible psychological step-by-step model of self-improvement. That is what Sefirat Omer is, as simple as it is. Okay, now with the time left, I'm going to switch gears here. And just like I said, if you take a root word and you see all of its permutations, all of its meanings. See, before I talked about just the meaning of the word, but now if you do the permutations, you start switching the order, and you get other root words. And all of these are connected. This is one of the deepest levels of what we'll call purely Jewish meditation, where meditation, the word is hitbonenut, from the word understanding, bina. And here we just talked about the 50 gates of understanding. So here, with just one word. Now, for those who know, one of the sections of the Zohar is called Tikkunei Zohar, literally the fixings as taught by the Zohar. And what it does, it takes the word Bereshit, which is 6 letters. Well, in the Sefer Yetzirah, it explains that 6 letters can be combined in 720 different ways. 720 different ways. And many of those form words or 2 words together. So that's what the Tikkunei Zohar does. It takes the word Bereshit and it shows us what words are there. It's not a word game. Basically, if you delve into Tikkunei Zohar, in a sense, it's telling us the what, where, why, and how of creation. In the word Bereshit, it's like, in a sense, it's like all there. So we can do the same thing with a concept. You can take a concept and run it through the entire Tanakh, through the whole Gemara, through the whole Kabbalah and Hasidut, and see all the connections. And that's why what we're explaining here is when we're counting the Omer, it's a type of meditation, especially when we do the combination of the Sefirot. So it's not just Netzach, Sheba, Malchut. As we said before, we have to the more you know about what Netzach is, the more you know about what Malchut is, that's the key to tell you, oh, this is the energy of the day. This is what needs fixing. This is what could possibly be fixed. This is a help, a something to assist you to fix a part of your soul. So I'm going to take one idea now, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. To be honest, what I'm going to give over in the next, we have around 15 minutes, could easily be much, much longer. But I'm going to leave the work to you. In other words, I'm going to lay out the connections, and then hopefully people will then take the time to meditate on it. For many, many, many years, Rav Ginsburg, after a 2 or 3 hour class, and for those who follow Rav Ginsburg's classes, so much information and so many ideas are given over in 2 or 3 hours. But he would end the class and say, now everyone should go and meditate on this. And for many, many, many years, I would take notes at the classes. And the whole rest of the week, I would do exactly what he suggested. I would go over and over and think about it and ponder it and make connections. Because if not, for most people, it goes in one ear and it comes out the other. No matter how elevated the teaching is, if you don't go back and review it, and going back and review it is like meditation. It's focusing on what did I just learn? And to integrate it, I have to think about it. I have to focus my thoughts. So the idea is like this. The Ari explains the energy of the first night of Pesach, Seder night. And of course, we call it Pesach. Pesach, literally, Passover is a good word for Pesach. It's a good translation. But Pesach is a little bit more active. It means to jump over, to leap. So the Ari explains something very, very, very profound. Because everyone knows Seder night, the energy it's electric. It's electric. And in the last few years, many people have been forced by by the pandemic to actually spend Pesach, and sometimes just alone or with a couple. Very different than the big Seders that we're used to. But it's still electric. The energy is electric. So the Ari explains what's happening is that it's not just that God jumped over the houses where the Jews had put the blood on the lintels and the doorposts, that there is what's called hishtalshalut. There's a cause and effect or a chain reaction of how things happen in this world. The same thing with God's light and energy. For God's light and energy to come into this world, I'm doing this like graphically, but obviously it's not just spatial. But as it were, God's very high energy has to gradually go through many, many refinements and curtains and worlds and levels until it can come into this world in a way that we can handle it. So the Ari says, what are we feeling Seder night? That God jumps over his usual way of gradually letting his light come in the world. He jumps over it, and there's this influx of energy just pouring down. That's what we're feeling. But then the Ari says, after the first day of Pesach, God takes it away. He takes that light away, and now we have to start from first day of the Omer, second, third, fourth. We have to now earn that light. We have to make a vessel for that light, and then at Shavuos, if we've done our work properly, we can, but this time more from our own efforts, we can re-experience this incredible shefa of light. So what's the dynamic here? The dynamic is God reveals, but then he takes it away. So watch what we're going to do here. And again, I'm giving you, like, we'll call it, it's called the chapter heads of what we can connect this to. So this idea from the Ari, pardon me 1 second. This idea from the Ari is based on something much more primordial, where before the creation, all there is the infinite light of God. There's no time, there's no space, there's nothing other than God, which we call the infinite light of God. And in order to create this world, as the Ari explains, God had to mitzamtzem his presence in order to make a place for the world. So here again, we have infinite light, and for a good purpose to create the world, God takes it away. He hides it. And this is a secret of the tradition that Rashi brings in the beginning of the Torah. When the first thing created in creation, okay, the first sentence says God created the heavens and the earth. But the first thing where it says, and God said, let there be X, and there was X, is with light. And then Rashi tells us, the famous question is, well, at that point there was no sun and moon and stars. So what was this light? So the tradition explains this was a spiritual light. And Rashi says God took it away and is saving it. He didn't take it away, he hid it. That's much more important. He hid the light for the tzaddikim in the time to come. And of course, we are all have a point of the tzaddik in us. Mech kulam tzaddikim, and your people are all tzaddikim. And actually, it's good I correct it. It sounds like he took it away. He hid it. And where did he hide it? So there are different answers, and they're all true. One is in the Torah. Now, when we learn Torah with full focus, we are experiencing some of that infinite light. We're told it's also in Shabbos. We're told Shabbos is 1/60th of the world to come. We're told it was in the light of the menorah, and today in the Chanukiah. So again, there's an influx of light, and then it's either taken away or hidden. Then we have, of course, we have the menorah. The menorah was hidden away before the temple was destroyed. The menorah, which was this beacon of light to the whole world, was hidden away. To this day, it's hidden away, and it will be revealed when Mashiach comes, and that hidden light from the first day of creation will begin to shine greater and greater. Now we have another connection. The tradition that when a fetus is in the womb, it says that there's an angel comes and teaches the fetus the entire Torah. And in the Gemara, it says, though, that there's a candle lit in the womb. Now, obviously, this is symbolic, but they make a point of connecting it to light. So what are we told? That right before the baby is born, the angel touches the baby here, and they forget the whole thing. So here, we're told again, the whole Torah is revealed to us in the womb, and then it's taken away. So if everyone's following, we have a pattern here. It's not just once or twice. We have a pattern. Now, we can connect this very, very much to B'dikat Chametz. What do we do before B'dikat Chametz, according to the Ari? And almost everyone does it now. We hide 10 pieces of chametz, and then we look for them. What do we do at the Seder? We break the middle matzah, and we hide away until the Afikomen. So up to now, we've been saying there's this light, and then it's hidden away. But there's always the third stage where it will be revealed again. The menorah will be revealed again. The infinite light of the first day of creation will be revealed again. And God, who contracted his infinite essence in order to make place for the world. So we're told that when Mashiach comes, the knowledge of God will cover the earth like the waters cover the sea. The knowledge of God, the revelation of God, the presence of God will be all-encompassing. So there's really three stages: revelation, hiddenness, and then revelation. Now this also connects to, we could say about Eretz Yisrael also. Eretz Yisrael, God leads Avram to Eretz Yisrael. What's the first thing that happens? There's a famine and Avram has to leave Eretz Yisrael. Comes back, and then Yaakov and sons have to go down to Egypt. And then we come back, and then the first temple, and the 10 tribes are taken away. So this model, this dynamic, is also the dynamic of exile and redemption, and of ratzo v'shov, running and returning, running and returning. So, like I said, these are chapter heads. I mean, I could have devoted a whole class to this, but if people are following, and I see some people are writing there, and that's the best thing to do. That's how we can remember afterwards. And of course, Baruch Hashem, on the Galei Nai website and YouTube, and also on our website and YouTube, this is being recorded, and you can watch it again to review it. There's one other idea that I thought of that's connected in a much more contemporary way. Most likely people have heard of the book Eish Kodesh from the Piaseczner Rabbi, who wrote it before and during his time in the Warsaw Ghetto. And when the writing was on the wall and he understood that the ghetto was going to be liquidated and his chances of survival were small, he hid the manuscript. People know the story. He hid the manuscript under the floorboards of wherever he was staying. And he was taken, and he was killed in the death camps. I'm not sure how many years later, 10, 15 years, I'm just guessing here. They were doing repairs or fixings on this place, and the floorboards were ripped up, and they found this document, this manuscript. And thank God the person was a moral person, and there was a note in the book saying, if anyone ever finds this manuscript, please send it to my relatives in Israel. And this person did that. And from that, we have the famous book, Eish Kodesh. So here, when I was going through different examples, I remembered this also. The Eish Kodesh revealed incredible insights to what it must have been like to go through what they were going through. It was hidden away, and then it was revealed. So here's like a historical, contemporary story of the same dynamic. So we'll just go back to what the Ari said about Pesach, that there's a purpose here. There's a purpose that God hides, as it were, himself, because if God didn't hide himself, the world couldn't exist. the world couldn't exist because it would just be overwhelmed by the presence of God. But on a more human level, this idea of revealing and then hiding is for our benefit. The Baal Shem Tov brought a beautiful mashal about how to teach a child to walk. And so if everyone can visualize, the baby's now 1 year old, is ready to take their first step, and they're holding on to their parents' hands, and then the parent has to let go. At a certain point, has to let go. And maybe the baby will fall, and then you help them up, and then you help them take a couple of steps, and then you let go, and then you take a step back. Come on. That's how it works. That's on a very simple, practical level, but also on how God works with us. So Sefirat to Omer, that's what the Ari is saying. God reveals this incredible light, this incredible source of inspiration, and then purposely takes it away and is saying to us, I want you to be in the image of God. But that means you have to work for it. You have to earn it. And that is the greatest chesed that a parent who smothers their children and won't let them go play with any other kid because maybe they're going to fall down or get a cold, or it's smothering the children. As hard as it is, sometimes we have to let go. And at a certain point, children become teenagers, and then we all know what that's like. But at that point, even if we try to stifle them, it usually doesn't work. So God is teaching us, and Sefirat to Omer, like I said before, I didn't say it like off the cuff or sarcastically, that Sefirat to Omer is the original 49-step program of self-improvement, of spiritual growth. So I just want to bless all of us that we take advantage of these very, very precious 49 days, and we not just count the Omer, but we make the Omer count for us. A second. Okay, so what we'll do now, I assume Eliezer is still there. Hopefully everyone can unmute themselves. And anyone who has a comment or a question or whatever, you know what, I'm going first to the chats. This is from Nachum, my friend in Tekoa. Did you mention them? Please tell us what the inner aspects of Chachma, Bin, and Dat are. Okay, very, very good question. So we'll do it even a more complete way. According to Rav Ginsburg, we have 10 Sefirot, but everyone knows that there's really 11 Sefirot. Count Dat. So we have really 11 Sefirot. But when we do the inner dimensions, that's what we were talking before. The inner dimension of Chesed is Ahava, love. The inner dimension of Gevura is Yira, fear and awe. So Keter has 3 inner dimensions. So when you take them all together, it's 13 inner dimensions. So I'll start from the top. Keter, the 3 inner dimensions are Emuna, Ta'anug, and Ratzon. Emuna, faith. Ta'anug, pleasure. And Ratzon, will. The inner dimension of Chachma is bitul, which means ego nullification. The inner dimension of bina is simcha, is joy. Aim habanim smecha halaluka. A mother of children is happy. Simcha has to do with bina, and bina has to do with hit bonanut. So we're told that on a spiritual level, one of the greatest joys is when we come up with new understanding through the process of meditation. That this is like pure joy. It's pure inner joy. It's what's called a chiddush. We get a new understanding of something, and it's like, wow. And the inner dimension of dat is yichud, is unification. That's what dat means. It takes chachma and bina, and it integrates it, unifies them, and then showers it down to the lower sefirot. So Shana is asking, is this connected to the 13 attributes of mercy? Most certainly. Most certainly, the 13 inner dimensions are connected to the 13 midot harachamim. Let me see what else we have here before we open the mics. Amy Datz says, I have a question about a contemporary event. So Amy, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. We know there was a big ship that stuck itself in the Suez Canal. And the ship was stuck because of a great east wind. And that great east wind occurred almost exactly at the same time as the great east wind that separated the sea so we could cross. Now, all the king's forces and all the king's men couldn't move that ship. But through an act of God, there was a king tide. And the king tide is what moved the ship. But I have to ask you, well, the king, I mean, what other king could there be? But I have to ask you, the ship was stuck for 144 hours. And I know that there's a gematria related to 144. And I wondered if all of this came together because the day that it became unstuck was during Passover.
Wow.
So it seems like all of this is related to what happened during Passover. And I wondered about the 144 hours, if you had a comment.
My overall comment is you made unbelievable connections there. That was like, I'm being quite serious. That was like a meditation in contemporary events. In other words, taking all these different parts of the story and putting them together to create we'll call it a possibility. I would never like go put myself on the line and say, what you're saying is that's exactly what happened, and it means X. I actually have quite a problem sometimes, especially when tragedies happen and different spiritual leaders make comments as if they know the exact reason why this terrible thing happened. It doesn't sit well with me. It could be that they're right. Could be that they're right, but to so definitively pass judgment on why terrible things happen, that's God's view. But anyways, I don't know what to say about the 144. I know 144 is gematria kedem, which means Correct. Yes. Yeah. Right. You're right. You're right. So the way you described it, it was like, oh my gosh, this is like, this is
Ruach
like,
Kadim.
this is like,
Remember, the king tide could only have happened on Passover Eve, which allowed not only the freedom of us, but the freedom of the ship.
I
Wow.
think it's an awesome connect. I want to tell a Baal Shem Tov story very quickly. But the Baal Shem, he lived at the very beginning of the Enlightenment movement. And Jews were slowly, many of them were being drawn away from Jewish thought. Anyways, a Jewish professor who had kind of distanced himself from the Jewish community came to the Baal Shem Tov and said, I've been studying the 10 plagues and especially the events about crossing the sea for 20 years. And I've done extensive research, and I can definitively prove that, actually you see these in the paper all the time, that on the night that we crossed the sea, there was a almost unprecedented conjunction between Jupiter, Mars, and the moon that maybe never happened in all of history. And because of that, it created an enormous pull on the tides and made the sea split for a period of like 6 hours. And then the planets moved and water came down. So I can prove there was no miracle here at all. It was all natural. So the Baal Shem says, what a miracle. What a miracle at the very moment that the Jews were surrounded by the Egyptians on one side and the sea on the other, that there was this once in a history conjunction of Jupiter, Mars, and the moon. He said, what a miracle. So I don't know how to react to your description of events other than thank you very much. It was like, I can't claim to know what happened there, but the way you put it together is like very, very awesome, very mystical.
Well, I have to keep thinking that God is up there laughing, saying, so humanity, you think you're in charge? Watch this. Watch this. Because, the king tide that occurred at Passover was when the earth was closest to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
It was perihelion, I think is the word.
Uh-huh.
And so it was a very special king tide.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
Amy, you thought of that yourself?
I'm sorry,
All by
what?
myself. I just sit here and had a revelation.
Wow, good for you. Kol hakavod. Well, we should publicize it, don't you think?
Go right ahead. I donate it to you. You can use it any way you want.
Can you
Okay.
message me? I didn't get all the details. You should put it out there.
I'll just say this: a strong east wind captured it, and it was a king tide that got it loose.
I wasn't sure about what caused it. I only now just yesterday saw something about it and the effect that it had economically. But it was connected to COVID. I thought it was a COVID
No.
Installed because of the supply chain or something.
Well, it affected every person on the planet because it affected our supply chain for our food that moves. I mean, like 10% of all good food and goods moves through the Suez Canal.
Right. I think
so it affected everyone on the planet, and I can't think of a bigger, stronger God message than affecting everybody on the planet.
Well, I could add here that that this is something I don't think we've taken advantage of it, but I think one of the greatest teachings of the whole pandemic is showing how much of a global village the world has turned into. And
Yes.
of course, the possibilities of a global village is ripe for a messianic era. In other words, where all of humanity will be able to come together because of the way that we have managed to create our world now. But like you just pointed out, the way the pandemic spread all over the world is because people were taking airplanes all over the place. And 300 years ago, if there was a virus in a certain county, in a certain country, it could have just stayed there. But now with people traveling all over and the economics and everything, it was spread literally all over the world. All over the world. Yes, Toby.
Yeah, I have a question. If somebody is making noise, needs to mute. That's just a comment.
Yeah,
That's the noise.
someone is making a noise that makes it hard to hear. So if you could,
Okay, so I have a question and a comment. Well, kind
Yes.
of comment question. The first question is the spiritual effects of counting the Omer. Does it take effect if you don't have Kavana? And what about people who are not counting the Omer? Like there's so few people who are actually counting the Omer with Kavana when you think about it, that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So this is like a very subtle kind of question and answer. Is
It's very hard to hear. Please,
Yeah.
everybody mute.
You know, I think the best idea if everyone mutes themselves voluntarily, and when you want to say something, then you unmute. Anyways, so it's kind of like Shabbat. Shabbat happens every week. It's not dependent on us whatsoever. The question is, do we plug into it or not? In other words, Shabbos is happening. Rosh Hashanah is happening. Is there an influence from that if we have no connection to it? Well, it could be yes and it could be no. But for those who do plug in, so let's say someone hates Shabbos, so they're getting all the advantages of Shabbos. But Shabbos is happening. Now, again, depending on the person and the circumstance, someone could be very, very, very far away from Shabbos and on a very subtle level will somehow pick up the vibration from Shabbos and maybe get a holy thought or a thought of tshuva. We don't know how. So if we count, it's like prayer.
We can't hear you.
It's Eliezer.
Everybody mute, please.
It's Eliezer. I think it's coming.
Eliezer? Eliezer? There's a lot of noise coming through.
אליעזר, אתה שומע?
I don't think he hears. I'm
Can
sorry.
you mute him?
Yeah, I'm not running the show here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, Toby, did you understand what I'm trying to say? It's like let's say you pray and you have no kavana, your head is somewhere else, but you're actually saying the words. Does that have an effect on you? Well, maybe yes and maybe no. It's like, you hear what I'm saying? It's like obviously we're a lot of times we don't have proper kavana, but we're told we should do the mitzvah anyways, because it will have some kind of effect on you. There's something my wife already says, I can't remember where she got it from, but the question is, if I have no kavana, should I pray anyways? And the answer is yes, you should pray. Why? Because let's say you have a lot of zeros, and then one time you manage to daven with a lot of kavana. That's like putting the one in front of all the zeros. All those zeros now equal 1,000,000. Because if you would have stopped the davening because you didn't have kavana, then you really would end up with 0. So even if we go through the motions, the bigger question is someone who's unaware that it's Shabbos at all. Is there an effect on them? In fact, this question is a huge question in the Gemara about Yom Kippur. In other words, does the day itself atone, or is it the person has to deserve the atonement?
Both.
You know what I'm saying? In other words, let's say a parent and a child, and the child does something not very good, and then they do tshuva for it. So great. Now what happens if they don't do tshuva, but the parent comes to the realization that I need to forgive them anyways. So the child in the end didn't do tshuva, but the parent forgave them. So that's what they asked about Yom Kippur. It's like, does the day itself atone? God is saying, I'm going to wipe you clean, whether you work at it or not. So it's very similar to the question that was just asked. Is if counting the Omer with no kavana, or not counting it at all, has any effect. So the answer is yes and no, but it's very, so many gradations of how it could affect us.
Because if I could just jump in, I mean, before, I'm sorry, does somebody else have a question?
No, go
I was
ahead.
just going to ask, before the Arizal, I mean, nobody except for Mukubalim knew about this. Am I wrong? I mean, the everyday Jew just wouldn't have been even, maybe unless maybe the Sephardic communities, but we would not have been aware in applying kavanot to counting the Omer.
You're correct. You're correct for sure. Even before the Ari, there are many, many, many teachings of what the purpose of Sefirat HaOmer is.
Yeah, I know, but in terms of the availability to the Jewish community, and whether it was okay for the regular person to even learn these things.
Well, the general principle that we have is that the farther we get from Sinai, the more is revealed of the hidden Torah. We're talking about the revealed and hidden. The farther we get from Sinai on the revealed level, the more, in a sense, more machloket there is, the more unsurety. That's why today, and it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but if a person has a question in Jewish law, at this point, it's basically, it depends on who you ask, what kind of answer you're going to get. In other words, the farther we're from Sinai, the more diffused our understanding or our unity of halacha is. But as far as the mystical tradition, the farther we get from Sinai, the more and more is revealed. So there's always new things being revealed that weren't done before or weren't known before. And that is a natural progression. In fact, if we're talking about this historically, historically, all of the minhagim we have of Avelut for Sefirat to Omer really only started 1,000 years ago. Before 1,000 years ago, the way we looked at the Omer was quite different. Historically, now there were connections with judgment, because one of the meanings of Sefirat to Omer is we're counting towards the wheat harvest. The wheat harvest was the economic backbone of Israel. If the wheat harvest fails, it could be famine. It was like the most important economic and food of Israel. And during the time from Pesach to Shavuot, a lot of things can go wrong with the harvest. Bugs, mildew, mold, a late rain, a huge wind. And so there was this idea of judgment from Pesach to Shavuot until we had the wheat harvest. And then later, it was really during the Crusades, because most of the terrible incidences during the First Crusade happened during the Omer period. And it was then that the rabbis of the time went back, in a sense, in Jewish history and saw a precedent in the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva.
Really?
Yes, and connected it to, in other words, before 1,000 years ago, we didn't have these customs of Avelut. We knew about Rabbi Akiva and his students, but there wasn't necessarily mourning customs.
Wow.
Not
that's
cutting your
incredible.
hair, no weddings, all of this. So I'm just pointing this out because Torah develops. I'll just use an example. We open up a siddur and we daven, and we think this is what the siddur has been like for thousands of years. But that's not historically correct. It took quite literally thousands of years to get to the siddur that we have. Same thing, you go to a wedding, and at a certain point, it seems like all weddings are exactly the same. You have the same customs, you have the bedekin, and you have the chuppah, and you have the ketubah, and the ring, and all these things. But if you go through the history, again, it took thousands of years to get to what we now assume has always been the way you get married. It wasn't like this. There are many changes, many differences, many developments. I'm not sure why I got into this, but it was a good lead-in to explain some of these things. Okay, we have just a few more minutes. Any last-minute questions?
So, Rabbi, I wanted to share the resource that I found really helpful with regard to Shorashim. Rabbi Raphael Hirsch has his etymological biblical dictionary, which is perfect source for that source of meditation that you're speaking of. I also wanted to know if you knew when this class would be available to listen to again.
Okay, so do you get my emails from Or Hadash?
I don't know. So,
okay. So what I'm going to do right now for everyone who's still online, I'm writing. Why doesn't chat open? Why? Come on, chat. It's not opening. I wanted to write my email for everyone.
Okay, it probably is part of the Gal Einai script that they send to introduce your class, I hope.
They don't have my email.
Do you want me to write it on my chat?
I don't know, my chat is not opening up. I don't know why.
I can write it if you want.
Okay, it's very simple. What I'm saying is if you'd like to be on our email list, So every week I send within a few days, this week it's going out Thursday morning, a copy of this whole class and any other classes that I've done during the week. So it's
What-
Rabbi
With a
at,
capital
no,
R?
no, Rabbi at the Trugmans,
Wait. T-R what?
Trugman,
Yeah, Trugman, Trugman, Yeah,
and S at the end, Trugmans.com.
yeah. .com.
And then if you write me and say, please put me on your list, so then we will put you on the list, and every week you will get any classes that I've taught, because I teach for many other classes other than Gali 9. And that's how we do it.
May I say something
Yes.
to what you were saying?
Yes,
I'm currently reading the book by Oliver Shalom, Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Arguments for the Sake of Heaven. And it's really amazing. My background's in philosophy, and really at the end of their lives, Nietzsche, Freud, Mendelssohn, Hess, and all of these people, they say, and this is very interesting, they said, I think Mendelssohn said and Hess said, I've tried to kill the Jew within, but at the end of the day, he always surfaces and he always makes himself known. At the end of the day, they all said basically the same thing. I've come to my realization that it lives within me in a subliminal manner. Even though I don't consciously go to shul and do the actions, these men were, I guess, honest enough or wise enough to understand that this encompassed their Weltanschauung, their whatever you call it.
They weren't
worldview.
Jewish. They weren't Jewish. Were you talking about Nietzsche?
Yeah, whatever Hess, the certain whatever Freud, Hess, whatever.
Freud was definitely Jewish.
Nietzsche was Jewish, I believe.
I don't think so. Not that
Yeah,
I
or
know
maybe
of.
not. Maybe not. Maybe you're right. Yeah, maybe not. So all right. So whoever was Jewish in the list there. All right, I don't know exactly, but whoever was Jewish in the list there. They all
Your point is
basically
very well taken. Your point is
Yeah.
very well taken.
So do you believe in that subliminal? I mean, I know from my
Absolutely.
child, I mean, we're not conscious, we're not even aware. And people that think, well, all right, I'm observant, yeah, I'm conscious, I'm aware. I don't even think that we're conscious and aware when we daven half of the time, when we do certain things. I don't think we even realize the ramifications.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mentioned it before. It's called the Pintele Yid, or the what I did. Oh no, I just thought of another one. Is remember the story of Hanukkah, where a flask of pure oil was hidden away, and then they found it, and that's how they could light the menorah. We're told that that's symbolic of no matter how far away a Jew gets spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, that there is the spark of holiness that can never be erased. And some people, it's true, they go through their whole life unaware of what is moving them. I had a conversation once with a person who, in a certain way, was trying to prove to me that their actions, the things that they believe in this world, had nothing to do with their being Jewish. And what I tried to explain to them, and they had no Jewish observance whatsoever, and they were almost antagonistic. But when I kind of mirrored some of the beliefs of this person, and I said, you have no idea how Jewish your different beliefs are. you don't know enough to associate it with Jewish beliefs that have been handed down during the generations, but you are so Jewish. You are so Jewish. And actually, I'm going to end with a story. I just remembered this. This was going back, this is going back 35 years. We were on educational shlichut in Denver, Colorado. And I brought Rav Ginsburg to Denver to teach. And he taught, and the subject of that night was Eretz Yisrael. It was about Eretz Yisrael. And he was very careful with his words, but he was, trying to point out that, God gave us Eretz Yisrael, and it's the Holy Land, and all of that. So, so someone got up during the question period and pretty antagonistically said, I really take offense at your making any separation between Jew and non-Jew, and kind of went on and on and on that we are, we're all human beings and we're all together. And I was like holding my breath because I didn't know how Rav Ginsburg would answer her. And what he said was exactly what the story I just related. He said, you have no idea that your concept of a unity of humanity, what a Jewish thing that is. And he went into the whole idea of the Messianic era and peace between all peoples, and that that whatever division we have with the rest of the world now is for a greater purpose of being a light unto the nations. But the ultimate goal is to bring harmony and peace and the revelation of God to all people. And I heard later that she became a Bala Tshuva.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an amazing thing. Amazing thing. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I love the sessions afterwards. And we can all relate to each other and share everything. I just want to let everyone know is that this week it's tomorrow, but every Sunday I teach a Chumash class. And again, if you get our emails, then you'll get the link to the Zoom for our Chumash class. It's at 6 o'clock Israel time. And it's every Sunday. This week, because it was Pesach outside of Israel on Sunday, we moved it till tomorrow. Anyway, so I'm just inviting anyone who does get our emails. And if not, again, it's rabbi@thetrugmans.com. But also, I know that on the Gali Nai YouTube station channel, all of these are recorded and you can see them. I haven't done it myself, so I can't tell you exactly how to do it, but somehow that's how it's done. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
You have to go.
I do actually. I have another session. I promised a couple of people I would try to do a mediation.
Lila Tov. Now we got to go to the show.
So now remember, anyone can email me with anything they want. I always respond to email. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.